everyone, my name is Evan and I like to make stop-motion dinosaurs and monsters. And now that my mutant and my dinosaurs are ready for a showdown, I say it's time to set the stage today by making a dinosaur diorama, I do say. During this video today, we'll be making some giant film props, you might say, in the form of some prehistoric trees today. And as I craft away at some polymer clay and oven-baked clay to make these giant sequoias and redwood today, I'll be talking about Goliath, the T-Rex, I say, possibly the world's biggest theropod, some may say. Now, I'll admit, I've been doing a lot of videos on the topic of Tyrannosaurus Rex in particular lately, and I didn't necessarily want to make it the topic of today, I do say, because I went down quite a rabbit hole of prehistoric plants, some may say. So I'm just going to briefly mention at the beginning of this video today that the trees I'm making are basically scientifically accurate for the time period for the dinosaurs and mutant that I'm setting the stage for. But there's definitely one good reason and maybe one not so good reason that I'm basically making Tyrannosaurus Rex today's topic. Now, the bad news, in all honesty, isn't that bad. More or less, I had some people kind of correcting me in the comment section for my last video for size estimations on Tyrannosaurus Rex. Now, this video is essentially kind of coming in defense for them, actually, as well as providing other examples for theropods that are potentially bigger than Tyrannosaurus Rex. Now, I can't state this enough, but it should be briefly mentioned again that more or less every single, size estimation that you get for a dinosaur is a estimation, essentially meaning it's a guess. It's not going to be accurate, and unfortunately, we'll probably never know the exact size of these animals. But either way, we're going to shift gears to the good news today, because Tyrannosaurus Rex was truly an incredible animal. A formidable predator quite unlike any other that existed on Earth. There's plenty good reasons this dinosaur is known the world over, and is considered the king of the tyrant reptiles. Every year, new papers are published about this awe-inspiring species, and we learn more and more about its anatomy, habits, and evolution. And T-Rex, well, obviously was also a giant, among one of the biggest theropods that ever lived, with specimens such as the one nicknamed Scotty, potentially achieving a weight of 8.8 metric tons, and a potential length of over 12 meters, or approximately 40 feet. And another good contender for the world's largest Tyrannosaurus Rex specimen is Sue, which also happens to be the most complete T-Rex skeleton known, and she's on display in the Field Museum in Chicago. This specimen is in a similar size range as Scotty, just over 12 meters in length, with a body weight ranging from around 8.4 to possibly 9.1 metric tons. Some more incomplete and unpublished specimens of Tyrannosaurus are also known that have claimed to be even larger than both Scotty and Sue. These include the specimen known as Bertha. And no, not Roberta. Bertha is known from a single partial leg, represented by a tibia, fibula, and a femur. This specimen was found in the 1980s and apparently has an extraordinarily thick femur, with a girth even greater than that of the same bone in Sue. Another partial skeleton that is in the running for the biggest T-Rex ever is a specimen known as E.D. Cope. This specimen was uncovered in 1999, and his femur circumference both exceeds Scotty and Sue, although it should be noted that the bone is slightly shorter in length. However, the tibia, one of the lower leg bones, is far longer than any of these other Rexes. Calculating the body mass of this individual by scaling up from more complete specimens has yielded results between 11 and 12 metric tons, significantly greater than both estimates for Scotty and Sue. E.D. Cope is also particularly interesting from the unusual proportions of its leg. But now we'll be moving on to another truly tantalizing hint on how massive the Tyrannosaurus Rex could possibly get. And this specimen might just be the biggest one we have found thus far. It goes by the name of Goliath, which is a Tyrannosaurus Rex femur unearthed in September of 2024 in South Dakota. And without a doubt, this specimen is definitely worthy of its name. Now, unfortunately, only a single femur of this specimen has been found, but it's absolutely enormous. And to help give reference of the size of this bone compared to your average man, this bone sits at shoulder height. Goliath became known to the world when it was displayed at the Black Hills Institute at the recent Tucson Gem and Minerals Show, along with some photos posted online. A length and circumference measurement of the bone was also released, displayed next to the measurements of the specimens Sue, Stan, Scotty, and Ed Cope. And well, Goliath's bone was shown to be significantly larger in both length and robustness. However, as reported by The Vividend, who is a YouTube channel I highly recommend, he reached out to the paleontologist Pete Larson of the Black Hills Institute for clarification. It turns out that the length measurements from Goliath was taken from different points on the bone compared to the other Tyrannosaurus Rex specimens that I've listed here, whereas the other specimens have been measured from the greater trochanter to the lateral condyle, essentially going down the outer edge of the bone. Goliath was measured from the femoral head to the medial condyle, meaning the inner edge. This was done because the greater trochanter of Goliath has been damaged. So in this bone's case, going from the femoral head gives us a more reliable measurement. And it should also be noted that the femoral head and medial condyle on this specimen have also been damaged. So in fact, it probably would have measured a few extra centimeters. The Vividend also confirmed Goliath's dimensions by asking Dr. Brian Curtis of Fossil Crates to take more measurements. And sure enough, they were verified. But that also does mean that the length comparison provided online is also just slightly misleading, since the measurements for Sue, Stan, Scotty, and Cope are taken from the other edge of the bone in comparison to Goliath. And this edge is slightly shorter, as the greater trochanter doesn't extend quite as far as the femoral head does. So measuring Sue and Scotty from the femoral head to the medial condyle as well results in a length for Sue's femur of 136.6 centimeters, and Scotty's at 134 centimeters. But if we do consider that Goliath is missing those extra centimeters due to the weathered ends of the bones, a maximum length of 139.1 to 141.1 centimeters can be safely assumed for this specimen. So basically, no matter which way Goliath is measured, it seems to be longer than these other Tyrannosaurus Rex specimens. Plus, the circumference from the femur was measured in the standard location across all specimens, therefore it's definitely the largest in terms of robustness, with a girth even greater than Cope. So what does this mean in terms of body estimation for these tyrannosaurs? Well, it means that Goliath is, well, a Goliath. Estimating this T-Rex's mass based on an equation that uses femur circumference results in a conservative mass of about 11.4 tons, compared to Sue and Scotty's 8.8 tons and Cope's 10.7 tons using the same technique. But then, using a different method, which takes the volume of the femur into account, estimates range from 12.3 tons to 12.9 tons is produced. And that is for the Goliath specimen. And if you would like to learn more about the equations and calculations of this giant monster of a T-Rex, I highly recommend checking out Vividend's video, The Biggest Theropod Ever Discovered, aka Goliath the T-Rex. Because in all honesty, he probably does one of the best in-depth calculations for theropods I have ever seen on YouTube. Now, if these upper mass estimations are really accurate, then technically Goliath wouldn't be just the most massive T-Rex ever found, but also quite possibly the biggest theropod dinosaur ever discovered thus far. A estimated 13.1 meters in total length has also been calculated for Goliath, based from scaling up on Sue. Now, it's also very important to keep in mind that Goliath is only known from this isolated femur, so it makes calculating the entire mass and length of the entire body much less reliable than if we say it had a complete skeleton. But even then, it's still insane to think about that such a huge apex carnivore might have once been stalking prehistoric North America, equipped with formidable adaptations for locating prey and crushing the bones of its victims. There really has been nothing quite like Tyrannosaurus Rex in the history of planet Earth. It's probably also worth mentioning here that a study was published in July 2024 proposed hypothetically that T-Rex could have grown to even bigger sizes. They estimated that the absolute largest Tyrannosaurus individual that ever lived might have been capable of achieving 15 tons in overall mass and possibly more than 15 meters in length. Now, this study doesn't state that we are very unlikely to ever ever find a T-Rex in the 99th percentile of size ranges. The chances of one being fully fossilized and found are so very improbable that we are almost certainly never going to come across such an exceptional Rex. But amongst the number of total Tyrannosaurus Rex individuals that ever existed on the planet, there most certainly would have been a few that stood in a league of their own, above all others, just as we see with some abnormally giant modern animals. So Goliath thus far might be the only true example we have of a truly exceptional T-Rex. And it shows no matter what, there will probably always be a bigger fish. Now obviously there's a lot more that could be said about the spectacular new fossil, but the aim of this video was to be a concise summary of Goliath and the implications that this specimen has for understanding just how giant Tyrannosaurus Rex could really get. And if you just so happen to want a size comparison of Goliath and Sue, you can easily Google, well, those exact words and get a size comparison chart. If I can, I will provide a link in the post description below. However, I am slightly behind on my YouTube schedule posting, so I may or may not have that by the time this is posted, so bear with me. Now, as I finish this last tree in the video today, I'm going to give some honorable mentions of theropods that are also within the size range of Tyrannosaurus Rex. In 2023, a chunk of gigadentary was reconstructed as being comparable to Scotty at 10.4 tons. Now, before I move on, I'm going to briefly mention that this is a piece of dentary, and it's extremely hard to, well, get an accurate size estimation off a piece of jawbone. Then there's also a Rexy's Giga that also happened to be gigantic, comparable to the Giga holotype between 8 and 9 tons. Then there's Tyrannosaurus, with an estimated length of 12 to 13.5 meters in length, or 39 to 44 feet, with weight estimations between 6 and 15 metric tons. Then there is also Mapusaurus, measuring in at 10.2 to 12.6 meters, or 33 to 41 feet in length. And the largest specimen may have weighed 3 to 6 metric tons. And a quick honorable mention to Agrocanthosaurus, which also happens to be very similar in size to Mapusaurus. And all of those dinosaurs that I basically just listed are part of the Tyrannosauridae family. Basically the same ones that have Giganotosaurus in there. And quick fun fact about this giant genera of dinosaurs, they're all related to Allosaurus from the Jurassic period, which also should probably be briefly mentioned because it would also get quite large, sometimes comparable to T-Rex. However, I believe the largest specimen of Allosaurus ever found only measures about 30 feet. Now we're going to move on to the Spinosauridae, particularly the Spinosaurus aegyptiacus, which just so happens to be my personal favorite dinosaur and unfortunately is also known by very fragmentary remains. But with that being said, the size estimations for this dinosaur are 14 meters or 46 feet long and weighing approximately 7.4 metric tons or 8.2 short tons. However, it should be briefly mentioned that there are other size estimates for this dinosaur out there, giving it a potential length of 18 meters or 59 feet long and with a potential weight of 12 tons to 20 tons. Now, personally, that does seem very extreme, and it should be mentioned that unfortunately Spinosaurus is known from less remains than pretty much any of these other dinosaurs due to, well, various circumstances. And that about sums up all the fun facts for this video today. So if you enjoyed this content today, be sure to smash that like button as hard as a T-Rex, I do say. Comment below what you think of the project so far and share with your dinosaur and monster-loving friends. Now for a very brief build rundown today, on these prehistoric trees you might say, they're essentially made out of oven-baked clay and polymer clay. And then once the trunks were done, there was some pine needle and pine cone gluing fun. And there was also a lot of dry brushing today on those tree trunks, I do say. Now obviously the ending of this video is going to be slightly different than normal. More or less, I'm just gonna kind of leave you to the ambience of what the prehistoric forest could potentially sound like. So enjoy.
sticking around to the very end of the video. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the content, comment below what you think, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if any. And anyway, that's enough from me. Till next time, take it easy.